Okay, so again, the division property of exponents says that anytime you have the same base, you divide it. You can either move that denominator up to the numerator, change its sign, and then combine them using the rules of multiplying, or you can go straight to the rules of dividing. If you have both of those, so here's multiplying and dividing all in one. If the base is the same, we just start with that base. What are we going to do to the two terms in the numerator? When you multiply the two numbers, what do you do with their powers? Add. And then when you divide with the same base, what do you do with the power? Subtract. So here you can just combine that whole set into 8 to the third. Yes? Can you cancel? When you dividing of the exponents with the same base equates to subtracting the powers. Okay. So you could have canceled as well. So these 3 8s cancel with 3 of these, leaving how many? Just the 1. And so 8 squared times 8, you add the powers, you would still get 8 to the third. Okay. What if you had something like this? If you wrote this using positive powers only, what's your answer going to be? So here you have z to the 7. And then you're really dividing by this. So we're going to do what with the powers? Subtract the power. So you get z to the minus 1. And how would you, so this is one form of the answer. But how would you write this using a positive power? Careful. 1 over z. Remember, the negative power does not affect the sign of the number. It only affects whether that base is in the numerator or denominator of a fraction. So a power of negative 1 just takes your base of z, puts it into the opposite, in this case, the denominator. Okay, so this rule right here is called the quotient of powers. Okay, so we have the product of powers, the power to a power, and the power of a product rule. We're now adding the quotient of powers rule. And then the final one is the powers of a quotient rule. So here's the rule for what we just did. When you divide two numbers with the same base, you're going to subtract their powers. The next rule is the power of a quotient. And this one is very similar to the power of a product rule. And that is, if you have a fraction and a power applies to the fraction, that power can be applied to each individual base of the numerator and denominator separately. Okay, so if I gave you something that looked like this, 4/5 cubed is equivalent to cubing the 4 and cubing the 5 independently, and then simplifying whatever would come from that. Now careful, that's only if the bases are the same. So here, since the bases are different, you have to leave it just as it is. There's no way to simplify this any further. Okay, unless you expand it out. So 4 cubed is 64, 5 cubed is 125. So you could expand it.
And then would you divide it or no?
If you could, in this case, it's not going to simplify it all. Okay. All right. So let's say you took this expression and see if you can simplify what this fraction would become. And so now this combines the power of a product. You have two bases in here, okay, along with the power of a quotient. So when you look here, this power of 2 is going to apply to every base in the numerator as well as every base in the denominator. So you get 5 squared, you get y squared squared, and you get w squared. So when you simplify it, 5 squared is 25. When you take a power to a power, you do what with the exponents? Not add. You multiply. Now, in this case, adding gives you the same thing, but just coincidentally. And so you're going to when you take a power to a power, you multiply. So 2 times 2 is 4, all over w squared So this would be the simplified form of this. All right, once again, pretty straightforward. If you're using your calculator, very straightforward because it's going to give you your solution just by entering. So if we were to take this fraction here, 5y squared, all divided by w, and then this whole thing squared. Okay. If you are doing this on your calculator, you need to be very careful how you enter it. You need to group your numerators, or group your numerator together. Okay. And then you can hit enter, and you see that it confirms what we got doing it by hand.